intro stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we are finally back. There was a few day hiatus there, but we are back. It is sunny outside. This is Ask That, and I am Clark Sell. Today, we're going to have a show, kind of thinking like the old Seinfeld, the show about nothing. And with that, I brought somebody who knows nothing, John Ptacek. See, that was rude. I mean, you know a lot, but
I know nothing. I'm with you. I've many people in my house that will validate that, so I think we're good.
Well, so for everybody there, you and I have known each other for many, many years. We had this bag of things to potentially talk about, and I said, well, let's just riff and have a conversation. And so here we are riffing, and before we riff some more or play another beat or whatever, why don't you tell people who you are?
My name is John Ptacek. I live up in Appleton, Wisconsin. So for those of you not familiar with the snow-covered state of Wisconsin, it's about half hour south of Green Bay. I have the unfortunate displeasure of being a Bears fan in Packer country, which is hard.
Yes.
I work at Skyline Technologies, where I'm a principal consultant. I interact with a lot of customers, clients. Lately been doing some React stuff, some React Native stuff, working a little bit with AI, and going out talking to students to try and get them learn about the computer field, talking with startup companies, and a whole gaggle of things.
Whole gaggle. I like gaggles. So how do you like React?
I like React. You know, we spent a lot of time doing Angular stuff for a while, and that was good and interesting. And then Google decided they were going to get rid of Angular and call foobar Angular the next. So, you know, AngularJS became Angular despite really not being the same thing. And so we kind of looked around some of the technology stack. Obviously, React at the same time was really popular. And the interesting thing about React is a billion-dollar company like Facebook uses that to make tons of money. And so they are monetarily invested. And you take a look at Angular, and Google is, isn't really betting the farm on it in terms of things like Gmail or, you know, the apps that they develop. So, organization, we've kind of been developing, implementation stacks and how we go and bring React to customers and clients. Seems like it's really popular with devs and developer types. I did a presentation 2 years ago at that conference where I did a React versus Angular comparison and kind of talk through some of those things. And, you know, at the end of the day, though, it's really, we tell folks, my smart aleck comment all the time is I'm a high-priced consultant, so it means I get paid to say it depends, right? So depends on your org.
Unfortunately, it does. I mean, I all too often you see stupid enterprise decisions being made because somebody has an agreement here or there and doesn't really take the context of the environment or the resources or whatnot into play, and then you end up with this mixed bag of things that sort of work. I mean, they work, but they could work a lot better. Yeah.
So when we talk with orgs, we want to make sure that they are, implementing on a stack that makes sense for them. So some folks make sense to do Angular, others it may be React. Sometimes we even still have folks that jump up and down and say, can you do some VB.net for me? So those are great days. And SharePoint. I know how much you love your SharePoint.
No, I don't love either one of those. I actually really, really enjoy React. I've always been kind of an API server guy. So UI isn't necessarily, I've always been frustrated with it, but I really do enjoy React. Like it's pretty cool. It makes a lot of sense.
Right. The old story for Microsoft would always be that, you would have all these projects get started initially and all the guns would be pointing at each other and they'd be shooting themselves. Yeah. Google seems to have all these different technology implementations, and they throw it all out into the marketplace and then let the guns get pointed by, the community.
Yep.
Is it Flutter? Is it, what's going on with Fuchsia? Is it, Angular? What are they doing with Polymer? Talk to me about material design and, all those different things. And, it becomes, I don't know that, they're an advertising business. Yeah, they're an advertising business. I don't think they really know what they want their direction to be in terms of a technology stack. So it's kind of interesting to work, other than you should all be doing TensorFlow is apparently the one that's the one.
But here's the thing, like their cloud stack is fantastic. And, and the more I use it, it's fantastic. And it's unfortunately still in beta for, I don't know, the 10th year in a row, which is sadness. And there's certainly a few warts like there is in every stack, but I do really, really appreciate the lack of, I shouldn't say lack, the approach of zero buy-in. You get on AWS and you're like, I mean, there's no way you can get off. You can't even push a function without having to use their gateways and this and that to just push a damn function. And yet I can write a very simple node function and throw it in Google's functions and it's unchanged and it works. And it's like, yes, thank you. That's how it should work.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I've been thinking about this a little bit, is, I think when you're not first, right, you tend to be more agnostic. And Google has done a really nice job. They're third or fourth, depending on how much you think IBM is playing in the cloud space. But, their approach tends to be, they talk a lot about being open cloud provider, right? And giving you tools to not have that vendor lock-in, which I think a lot of orgs would appreciate. But I mean, you're going and, I don't know, AWS is just misery. Every time I log on there, it takes me 15 minutes to click to the center of the Tootsie Pop. But
I mean, there's a lot of nice things in AWS, and I get why they're where they are, and you have to appreciate that. But it also just makes me mad. Like I feel like it's all too hard. And I've had that same thing with Azure too. At times it's like, oh my God, I can't even navigate through the damn screens to figure out what it is that I'm supposed to really do. Like, and nothing's perfect. I mean, to be fair, I like the simplicity of like, if I'm not supposed to care about it, then why do I have to care about it? Right? Wasn't the promise that I could just throw my stuff up there and it just work? When did we get away from like turning it into I have to be a server admin to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do up there when it was just supposed to work?
Right. I think as the cloud stacks grow, right, it becomes a checklist battle between vendors, and the UX becomes just so complex that you're almost better off doing your implementations from, scripting it on the command line, and you get reproducibility, and exactly what you want to do, and you don't have to spend all your time hunting down this or hunting down that.
Yeah. Which, when you can script to it, you can play God with it, which is fantastic. If I remember right, you've been playing a lot with Graph and Graph databases, and I think a little GraphQL too. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. So I've been, the NoSQL stuff's obviously a lot of fun for people, but, I've been looking a lot at some of the graph databases. So it's a little bit different than GraphQL in terms of, the graph database is really, we have a node, right? And it's essentially a document with some data. And then the idea becomes that the relationships between the nodes are a first-class citizen in implementation. And so, essentially, it's Facebook, right? You get that 6 degrees of separation, figure out how you're related to. That problem's much easier to find in graph databases than it would be in a SQL database where you're doing this awful multi-column table join and this, that, the other thing. And it's been pretty interesting. So I'm trying to figure out what the best way to kind of do this is. If you have I think one of the industry leaders tends to be Neo4j, which is open source, I think, implementation, and then you have a company that's kind of making enterprise ready They have their own query language called Cypher, which,
Yep.
is pretty nice and agnostic. They got a good UX that they wrap around it. And then the Apache Foundation has another one. I think it's Tinkerpop, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm going to kind of space some names here. But there's some nice implementations there. And what is interesting is Azure, with their Cosmo DB implementation, has gone and put that Cypher database in there, or the Tinkerpop. So you can go and then have a graph database exist as part of your Cosmo DB implementation if you're on the Azure platform. So there's kind of a little bit more platform agnostic with the Apache side of the house, nicer tooling, a little bit easier query language on the Neo4j side of the house. And it's just, the implementations from there are different enough. You just kind of got to decide what makes sense.
Yeah, it is something that I've been looking at as well, and I really, really enjoy that space. I mean, when I think of that conference and our people and our mission of trying to connect to one another, the graph database really, really gets us closer to that kind of overall vision of being able to connect people to their like interests at a conference and suggest content or sessions that align to them. And, we're slowly kind of getting there, and it's cool. I mean, I wish in some cases, I know Amazon just they've stood up some graph service, database service, which I think is a beta invite only if you're cool and know somebody.
That would not be me.
Nah, I mean, as much money as I've given them, it's still not me either. So, and I don't know if Google has one or not, but because I just don't like managing server databases, but it's just me.
No, you can implement on GCP, the Neo4j stuff. I assume then you could go spin up a VM on the Apache side.
Yeah, of course. I just don't want to. Like,
no.
I just want to hit a button.
And the cool thing too with some of the graph databases is, right, we could, you and I know each other, we're connected on the graph, but then we could have other relationships on there. You're from Wisconsin and, or I'm from Wisconsin and I'm up in Appleton, and that's another relationship on the graph.
Yeah.
I'm working with maybe this customer, you're working with that customer, and you can then see, right, how many customers do Clark and John have in common? How often have they been in the same state, right? So, I mean, it solves some really hard problems from a data structure SQL approach.
Yeah, and I had asked if you were doing any GraphQL stuff, knowing that they are two independent things, although play together well, because I've done a ton of stuff on GraphQL and I absolutely love it. I think it is a slick stack. It reminds me of a time where you didn't have to get so bent around the axle of like knowing what your API is and trying to guess, but yet really focus at what you want to expose and then let others kind of figure it out. And I've been doing some graph endpoints with React and then aligning components to queries on that, and it's been a very fun way to make things dance. And I thought it's been really cool.
It is, and I think when you kind of do that API first thought through a project implementation, and then you have these NoSQL and changing data documents and JSON objects, right? It's those problems are really hard to solve in that traditional world that we've come to know. And the other part too is it allows you to, have the endpoints really focus on the experience for their customers or clients, right? So if you're, as we see more and more distribution of things and you think about scale, right? I mean, internet access in, let's say Africa is a totally different experience than it is here in the States, right? And you can then say, all right, let me just get that small subset of things I need to provide rather than maybe the richer experience I would provide in the States. Yeah. We were just, I was at the Microsoft MTC yesterday with one of our customers, and they are really heavily involved in providing education opportunities in Kenya.
Okay.
And so we're doing, or they're doing a project here in Appleton with a community garden where they're partnering with Microsoft on hydroponics. So, the ability to kind of grow food and plants
Sure.
in water and have some grow lights going. So I had to get grow lights in for 420 a day, I guess. But and the idea being that then they could go to Kenya and work through providing more food for children. So these schools are feeding 1,500 kids, probably the best meal that they'll have all day. And then trying to scale that up becomes hard, but you have a hydroponics implementation. Then the hard part there becomes, how do we get data, right? How do we get access to the internet? And that becomes some of the work that Microsoft's doing in kind of the white spectrum, or, kind of the unused radio waves of the world to provide internet. And they're doing an initiative here in Northeast Wisconsin for rural broadband using the same thing. So there's kind of some interesting things. I've been thinking about, how you, because we talk with these folks and partner with them a little bit, how you solve some of those problems.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been talking about that white space for years, because when I was there early in my career, I can remember them. That was a hush hush thing, and whatever they were trying, it was all like, oh, that's cool. You're sending stuff over radio waves. Like, is there an API that I can do that? Like, I am not smart enough to do that.
Yeah. So, Microsoft has started up in, kind of through Brad Smith, who's, I don't know, some fancy VP of legal or something or another. These 7, tech communities or tech centers in Northeast Wisconsin is one of them. And, so there's a woman up here who started a Woman in Technology group in Northeast Wisconsin, Michelle Schuler.
Yep.
She's part of that org. And they introduced something called Titletown Tech, which is the Packers and Microsoft each spending, $5 million each for venture capital startups in the area. And the other part of that,
which to be said, they are sponsoring and actively involved with us at that conference. So I think it's super cool that we were able to kind of come full circle and get that connection made.
Oh, that's awesome. But the other thing that Michelle is really passionate about is talking through that white space and bringing rural broadband, because I know that's part of Brad Smith's initiative, because a lot of these communities, it's Grand Forks, it's kind of where their data centers tend to be, where unless it's wired into Microsoft, there isn't a lot of broadband available.
Yeah. Well, have you kept up at all with 5G and the stuff that's coming with 5G?
I haven't really. So we're in Appleton, so we're kind of the entail of some of that stuff. So I try not to get too excited.
Well, so that's the funny thing. Like, I mean, I'm out in the sticks too, and so if 5G is everything that it promises to be, and it certainly seems to be that way, it really does change the landscape of us laying fiber lines and the really hard infrastructure of trying to get internet in homes where we can just start flinging it over the airwaves and at speeds which are drastically better than what we have today. And I look at our little town, and you can go over 2 main roads and there is no internet. Like, there's
oh wow
sorry, like sucks to be you. Like, you use your cell phone, but then you think about it, and if you're we don't have Comcast out here, but Comcast is the one who owns the lines. But if you're Mediacom or one of these folks, like, it doesn't even make sense to invest in it, right? 5G is going to catch up. You're going to lay a radio tower and you're done. And the speeds are ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I think that's the lesson of Google Fiber, right? They were going to go and change the world and wire up all these cities, but access is hard to go and lay all this cable and building and putting that in. It just doesn't make sense. So Google's kind of moved to similar type things. Like, how do we get wireless to be the provider? Because, getting access to put up, cable on those telephone poles
it's silly.
There's a lot of lawyers involved to get one of them signed off, right?
Yeah, I read something when the Olympics were going on, that one of the, I don't know if it was a chip manufacturer or whoever, whoever's involved in making 5G a thing, that they were using it. They were actively testing it with the Olympics and doing things like real-time video streaming on things like the bobsleds and places, because the bandwidth was fast enough that they could do things that they haven't been able to do before, with having a disconnected experience. And it really got me thinking, like, yeah, it really changes the face of IoT and our latency issues and I don't know, everything kind of surrounded by that. So this conversation in 5-10 years may be drastically different as the things that you could do.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be good when that becomes less of a barrier. I know there's even from a cost standpoint, I work with school districts, right? And they want to give laptops to people, but it's not fair because some of the kids go home and they don't have access to the internet, right? Yeah. And so how they're interesting problems to solve.
Yeah, and I live in that. I mean, we live in that world. Like our school district, there are portions of the district which internet access means if you have line of sight to a tower, great, maybe, or use your cell phone and you're hotspotting it. So you don't have to get very far out before that's really a deal.
Right.
Now, I'm not moving to the city. I like where I live. So. And I have pretty decent internet access because we moved to the part of the city that had internet. So
by choice, I'm sure.
Damn straight. Like, I work at home.
The Cell family, is there fast internet? Yes, then we'll go.
That's right, yes. Relationship to smoker, close? Yes? Good. Okay, check. Loud cars and garages? Yes, check. So you said you were doing stuff with startups. So as somebody who's trying to make it on his own, what you cooking?
Well, we've been talking with different organizations and companies. So Wisconsin is 50th for venture capital investment, right? So I have a buddy of mine, Jeff Lang, used to be CEO at Omni Resources, now at an organization called Breakthrough Fuel. And we worked together. We started a company, software company. We built this product, and then we kind of went to market with it. And we'll get together every now and then, and it'll be, he always tells the story. He goes, we've been doing it all wrong. When you go out to the West Coast or East Coast, you say you have this great idea, Facebook meets gelato, and they give you a couple $1 million to go and do it, and then you figure out if it works. Whereas here in the Midwest, we're going to go and build the entire thing to make sure it works, and then we're going to go and talk to people and see if they think our baby is pretty or not, and then we will be sad if one or two say no, and we'll think we made a bad choice. So, it's that Midwest, show me state kind of thing, even though Wisconsin isn't the show me state, but, there's that entrepreneur spirit, which is a little problematic to get over with our pragmatic farmer background.
Yep.
So there's a couple of startup accelerators going on. I know one is Generator, which is some UW-Madison graduates that partnered with Microsoft on the TEALS program. They have a venture fund that they use, or in Madison, Milwaukee. And they just started a program last year with called G-Beta up in Northeast Wisconsin. And the idea for G-Beta is an accelerator for companies. So each round they'll pick 5 companies, and they will go and work through, explaining, all right, this is how funding works. We'll work on getting you a pitch deck. We're going to train you on how to start a business. And the goal there is to grow that entrepreneurship. So Adrienne Palm is the woman who runs it, the program up here in Northeast Wisconsin. So they had a group of 5, and we, a couple Skyline people helped mentor the group. They have mentoring sessions. So we partnered to kind of go in and help on the mentoring. They just did their spring presentation last night at one of the colleges in the area. So, that's one way we've been working. And then just partnering with small software as a service groups and figuring out how we do things like that. We have a company we work with where, we just took like an equity ownership and did things at a cheaper rate to, see how that works. So there's a lot of fermentation, I think, happening in Wisconsin and in our neck of the woods. You have Microsoft and the Packers coming in to look for things to promote, different venture capital funds. Steve Case was just up in Green Bay last fall, funding, I think, was 100,000 or maybe 500,000 for one of the startups as part of his Rise cruise. So it's been kind of in that mode. So mentoring, it's always hard because we tend to work a lot with enterprise customers. So our first thought is, well, let's get the requirements down. Spend a couple weeks doing that, and here's a document. And then you have a bunch of really twitchy, no, run now. And, so we got to train ourselves to think a little bit different to, work with them too.
I have kind of a love-hate with the startup VC side of things. I feel like we've gotten away from a bit of teaching people how to make a successful business and like raise revenue versus teaching people how to. It seems like there's a lot of teaching people just how to get through investment rounds, and that profit isn't necessarily like, it's good if you take off, but a lot of startups just fail. And granted, I am not in the investment round. We are certainly taking the approach of bootstrap ourselves and make profit and do it that way. And I'll be curious as the years go on if we start to see like what the fallout will be in that world. I can't imagine that the return is super high. I mean, unless you just have so much money to piss away. If your bet is that you're going to get 2 or 3 of these things and you're hoping for the next white whale, the next Fortnite, which obviously Fortnite's a gigantic success. It just seems like there's a better way. But maybe that's me being too Midwest pragmatic, and I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that either. I think obviously you see some pretty ridiculous things happening on the coast, but I think the concept of coming to places like, Wisconsin, where you're 50th in venture capital funding, and saying there are options available to you if you have an idea and you're not sure how to get started, right? You may have to seed some ownership or things like that. But the fact that, they're trying to at least impart to young people and entrepreneurs and businesses is that there are other ways to kind of do this rather than, having to burn the end at both, be up all nights and working and figuring out how to do some of those things, because they're just, different paths.
What are you trying to say? I mean, I know we had this conversation before we started. It's been almost 2 months since I've taken a day off. Like, what are you trying to say?
No.
Is that a subtle dig there? I mean, we're both Bears fans, man. I'm not Cutler. I mean, what's the deal?
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I'm just giving
it gets back to that consultant world, right? It depends.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to, you got to find what's the best option for you. And I think for a lot of folks in Wisconsin, they didn't know those opportunities were there, that there were ways to go and find funding and ways to help you as an entrepreneur get your business started. And, some of them are going to go down that let's grow with revenue, and some of them are going to go down with, maybe I need some funding because I have a manufacturing round and I need to go and build this widget, and the widget costs money to go and talk to designers. And so it's just been an interesting experience.
Yeah. I like I said, we are certainly trying to do it. And I don't know, I learn something every day, and, running a business is hard. Being the doer in the business is hard, and running multiples of them is even harder and more stupid, or more great.
Yeah, there's one of my friends I talked to is quasi-retired. He's had a company that got bought out, and he just kind of got burnt on it, and he helps smaller companies. And he goes, "Yep, I had 20 years of the most expensive MBA trying to run my own business." So it's just the doing and the learning are such valuable skills, and just trying to.
Yeah, you start to make.
Like fire.
Yeah, I mean, you look at every hour and like, what's the return on that, and how do, like, it's really, if I I've always been a bit of an entrepreneurial person, from a very early age of working on the garage and I mean, gotta, I look back, I mean, there was nights in the garage. I bet I was somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 a week that I was making, in my early
Oh,
teens. And, and I think about the amount of cash I was making back then and sometimes like, well, maybe I should have just kept doing that. Like, I was doing pretty good. Um, but it's you really, you really look at business different when you're running it and when you're using your money in your pocket to pay for others and scale and priority of thing and um, it's then you think if somebody else is paying you like your service back to them and how do you help them grow their business and so often you can lose sight of all that in like big corporate America because it's just this giant wheel of things that happen and releases and HIPAA compliance and blah 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 blah.
MSDS safety sheets, OSHA.
Oh, that's funny. You said that. So
Uh-oh.
yeah, do I have it? Right, Illinois is a crooked state. Since we have a
Soon to be
business,
bankrupt.
since we have a business, I think it's funny when our software business gets things like we need you to hang your labor law things on the wall in your business, like as if I'm gonna hang this here.
Hang it in your son's bedroom. That would be awesome.
Oh, I should totally do it. Like I think these things are funny. Like what am I gonna do with this? That's what my taxes go to. Useless classic to hang on the wall.
I did so I grew up somewhat close to where you are in Lake Geneva, which I jokingly call Chicago's northernmost suburb. But,
Yep.
All my family was from Illinois and it's a bit, a little bit different down there.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it is. Well, listen, at the end of these, since we're coming to time, I like to acknowledge the other individual, and that being you. I would like to say thank you for being here today and spending your time and just riffing back and forth with me. Now, we've known each other for, God, I don't know. It's probably been a good 5, 6, 7, 8 years, somewhere in there. I stopped counting the years. And I want to acknowledge you for the time that you spend in the community, for the time that you spend with the kids, for the mentoring that you do for others and being out there and accessible. And I know you put your heart and soul in it while giving a whole bunch of us old curmudgeons a bunch of shit for things we deserve. And I think that your, just overall good attitude every day, and that is an example that one should follow. And so, with that being said, thank you for doing that and continue to do it.
Oh yeah, thank you, Clark. That's very kind of you to say, and right back at you too, right? I mean, you and Carrie put in a ton of times at the growing this community, that conference community, and you have your team that helps out with that. And I mean, it's I was at the MTC yesterday. I had my laptop open and the technical fellow there said, "Oh, that conference?" I go, yeah, I'm speaking there. And he's like, "Oh, I still want to go there. I just moved to the area and I want to go and hit that. And my kids are all excited to go back to the Dells." So, I mean, it's
Tickets
really,
are on sale.
Yep, that's what I told them. But you've created a, really vibrant, community of people and are passionate, and you every August, people go back to their jobs at enterprises, to startups, energized about what they do and finding their passion. And that's a gift that you give every year. It's awesome.
I appreciate it. We love it. And I was just up there yesterday, and I'm excited about the stuff that we're doing, and I'm excited that we're doing all this. And I think it's fun. It's a lot. It's cool. I would have never thought we would have been here as long as we were. I didn't think we'd make it after year one, and then year one, I didn't think we'd make it after year three, and I don't know. We'll
bacon.
See.
People come back for the bacon.
Yeah, bacon's getting expensive too. All right, last question. How do you define or think about community?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. How do I? I think, God, that's really fun. For me, I think about community. I think the first thing I think about is empathy, right? We're going out. I'm probably, that's interesting. Like for me personally, I like to go out and help and grow people. So I like to go out there. My kids, grown up here in Northeast Wisconsin, and, the better that I think there's opportunities and jobs and the ability to connect, becomes an important part for why a community is vibrant and evolves. And I think part of doing that is, making sure that people feel confident in what they're doing or imparting skill and helping them grow into the person that they want to be. We've done some crazy things here at Skyline, from working with 10,000 pieces of art for the Appleton Compassion Project, where the Dalai Lama records videos, to compile of music, where, we have 75,000 people coming down right before that conference, which means I show up exhausted, but, there's music and community happening there. And I think that it helps, create places that grow, and you have people engaged. And, I think all that kind of starts with empathy. You want to care about the people that are working next to you or have houses next to you or, working at jobs. Our CEO, Mitch Weckup, does a nice job talking about the reason we invest in community is, we want our, places where we live and work and go to school, and, that tech space growing, and there's opportunities for people, and that art exists and music exists. So I think that's it. I rambled a lot there, but that was a good question.
I think your answer is fabulous, and I appreciate you sharing, because I think it's near and dear to all of us and everybody who's on here. And I think we all do think about it a little bit differently, and I think understanding everybody's viewpoint on how they get involved in the things that they do or how they define it is important. I've realized that we all say the word community, and that word means very different things. We all have this, you say Kleenex, and you always think that it's the Kleenex box, and sometimes it's the sandpaper from Walmart, or it's not, right? They're not the same thing. And sometimes those subtle differences for some folks are much different. And I think how we get involved and do those things is important. So I appreciate you sharing.
I think connecting with empathy, I think that would be the sentence there.
All right, sir. Well, with that, everybody, thank you for watching. As John alluded to, that conference is in August. We are selling tickets. We want you involved. We're always looking for people on AskTHAT. I appreciate the time that you've spent here today. Got something cool? Leave us a note. Let us know. John and I will get back to you. Give us a thumbs up, like us, subscribe, share, Twitters, whatever. We like all
the
stuff.
things.
All the things. Do all the things, because we try to do all the things. John, thank you for everything today. Enjoy the sun, because your crappy snow that you keep pushing down on the great state of Illinois is starting to get in the way of April in this 175th day of January. So why don't y'all just stop that?
We're going to try. We're going to do our damnedest.
Or maybe what we're doing is pushing the snow up to you all, so the Packers don't have any field time, and maybe the Bears can get a little better. Right? As resident Bear fan, can we sabotage them a little bit?
It's all Viking world now. It's all changed.
They can't even. Yeah, they only practice two weeks out of the year. They have so much snow.
Yeah, that's true. So.
All right. Well, thank you for the time. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you next time.